Boys and girls, we have a very special guest with us today. My mother, Frankie McBride. Her grandparents lived on top of a very high mountain. In fact, the tallest mountain in Arkansas, Mount Magazine. She visited them often when she was a little girl. Mother, how did you get to your grandparents' house on Mount Magazine? Did you ride in a car like we do today?
No, we didn't. We had a car later on, but we didn't have a car for a long time. And we rode in a wagon. And we, uh, it was a long ways. Uh, we rode nearly all day in that wagon. And my sister and I, and my parents, and we we would stop and eat. We ate on the way, and we'd stop along, and we went around by, oh, it was about, I think it was about 17 miles, but it took us about all day. And we went around the road around by Spring Lake and on up what we call the Gum Tree and on to oh, it was a school at one time and a church. We went by there. Then the next place was Shoal Creek, and oh, it was a beautiful creek, and we'd get out there and play in the water a little while. And then we went on to the Millard store. It was just a little country store. And then it was time then to go up that steep mountain. And anyway, we rode in that wagon around those curves and all, and just couldn't wait to get there because my cousins lived there. I had I had my uncle and aunt and their four children. Let's see, they had five children. They only had four children then when they were living there, I believe. Anyway, they lived there, so we just couldn't. And then we had get-togethers there on Sundays quite often when my aunts and uncles and my cousins would come. But the one I was going to, Papa and Mama Apple, that was my grandparents, and they lived with my aunt and uncle and their four children. So they were there. We knew they were going to be there when we went. And then sometimes some of my other cousins were there. So we had a good time. And, I know when we got there, I couldn't wait to go in the house and see Mama Apple. I was real close to her. I was the oldest and the first granddaughter, and then two, I stayed with them one time when my mother was sick. I stayed up there about 6 months, lived with them. So I was real close to my grandmother, and which I call Mama Apple, Mama and Papa. So when we got there, I always wanted to go in and see Mama Apple and be with her and the other kids. They like to play outside more, but I like to stay with Mama Apple. And she embroidered. She taught me how to embroidery. And we would sit there and I would watch her embroidery. And then I liked to play the organ. She had an old organ, and I liked to stay in and play that organ. But I'd go out and play some too with them. We loved to play with the baby goats. It's just like our babies. And Pop Apple had a lot of goats. I could hear those bells ring that those goats had on anyway. And I don't know, the others played games and did several things. But I just had a good time, whatever if I was outside or inside. And let's see, was there anything?
I was wondering, you said it took all day to get there. How long does it take now to get there in a car?
Oh, It wouldn't take 30 minutes, I guess.
Oh my goodness. Uh-huh.
And
I know you said you stopped to eat. Was there a place you stopped to get food?
No, we took our lunch and ate on the way. No, there wasn't any place to buy anything.
You had a picnic on the way
we
then.
We just had a picnic, and we had quilts in the wagon that we, sat on and all. And,
so those horses had to pull that wagon all that way then.
Yes. They had to, we'd stop, I think, and they would rest, and we'd all rest. But it was hard for those horses to get up those steep parts of the mountain. And they got tired, I know.
Do you have any funny stories or interesting stories things that might have happened on the way up the mountain?
Now, I know Nancy did. I wasn't with them that day, but they were, Uncle Lee was in the wagon, and now they were going down the mountain that time, and we could go two different ways around the spring lake or around the other way up the mountain. And but anyway, Nancy and my cousin were in the wagon with Uncle Lee, and they stopped to play, stopped and got out of the wagon and wanted to play a while, because the wagon went slow and it was steep and all. But they stopped at Goat's Bluff and got out and played in the water a while. And then they almost waited too long, and they could not catch that wagon. It had gone around some curves, and they couldn't see it, and it really scared Nancy now. She was so afraid that they were left. But anyway, it was funny.
Oh my goodness. I guess they finally caught up with it then. Or did the wagon stop and wait for them? Do you know?
Uncle Lee, I think he waited for them, or they caught it anyway.
And Nancy was your sister.
One of them, Rose, wasn't that scared or worried about it, but Nancy was. But Nancy would keep telling Rose, "Oh, they're gonna leave us. They've left us," and she was worried.
What did you like to do when you got to your grandparents' house? Were there toys that you liked to play with? Let's see, you said you played with the goats some and liked to stay inside with your grandmother.
I might tell you about, we ate, I'll tell you something we did. They had an orchard. They had, Pop Apple grew everything. He grew vegetables and fruits and the finest grapes, and their peach orchard was across the road. And they worked, I know, in the onions and vegetables, and in fact, he peddled vegetables and fruits, which would sell them, go down to Havana and Belleville and sell fruits and vegetables. And we would go, when I was there, we would go to the peach orchard and just sit out there and eat peaches. And then, but one thing that I'll always remember are the watermelons Pop Apple raised. They were the finest watermelons that I've ever seen or tasted, and everybody, there was something about the soil or something about the mountain. They just were better tasting watermelons. People would come from everywhere to get watermelons when it was time for them. But I remember we would go, Uncle Lee and Daddy and them, they would take the watermelons out, cut them out there under a big tree in front of the house, and he would cut those watermelons, and we would sit on the front porch and eat them, and they were good. That's one thing we did while we were up there. I just remember that, and playing with the goats, and we had a good time.
Did you ever go swimming in the summer?
swimming.
Uh-huh.
We went to Spring Lake. The I remember when that was built. I don't know just how old I was, but it was a beautiful place to go, and we went up to Spring Lake and swam in the summer. And well, just a lot of kids would go up there. We'd have such a good time.
What foods did your grandmother or grandfather fix for dinner or meals?
Okay. Oh, that was a good time too. Aunt Irene did the cooking, and she was a good cook, and she was just such a sweet person. I just loved Aunt Irene, and but she cooked, and they had all those vegetables and all. But I know we would go to the table, and Papa Apple sat at the head of the table. It was a long, big table, and he sat at the head of the table, and he always asked the blessing. I can just see him. He had a little mustache, and seems like when he said the blessing, I couldn't always tell what he's saying. But anyway, Papa Apple said the blessing every time, and we all went to eat, and there was all of us kids sat on this bench on one side of the table, and it was along the windows, the bench, and that's where we sat. And there's these big double windows there. Had to be careful not lean back. You had to sit up. But anyway, and oh, I just remember all of us. We just had such a good time at that table and eating, and a lot of times. The family, my aunts and uncles and cousins would get together pretty often, and so it was a bunch of us. And I know a lot of times when I ate up there on Sundays, the kids had to wait to eat. The adults ate first, and we played outside. I could just see them in there eating, and I was wanting to go eat. But anyway, we would wait until they got through, and then we would go eat and sit on that bench. But I remember that everything they had, and huckleberries. Seems like every time I went to eat, she had huckleberry cobbler, and because you picked the huckleberries and they were good, and she would make those cobblers and pies, and Irene would. So that's what it was good eating. And oh my, when I'd spend the night and for breakfast, I could just smell that breakfast in the morning. We was ready to get up and eat. We just had, biscuits and ham and bacon and eggs and everything that went with it. It just smelled so good.
Where did they get their groceries?
Well, they came to Belleville some, and some to, I think they went over at Paris some too. They just didn't go very often. They raised everything they ate just about, so they didn't go like we do that often. You just didn't go very often now.
Where did they get their water?
Well, from the well, and another thing, that well, it reminds me, they didn't have refrigerators. They didn't have electricity, or and so to keep that water cool, their milk, they would let it down. You let it down in the well, and it would stay there in the well and stay cool. Or other things, you might have other things you'd put in a bucket or something that if you wanted it cool. But I know the milk, that was the main thing, to keep that milk cool, because they had, milk cows and had their milk, and that we would put that milk down in that well and then pull it up for when it's time to drink milk or a meal.
Now, did they have computers or televisions? What about radio?
No, they didn't. Now, when I went up there, they didn't have any of that. So I don't know. I know one thing, we would go to bed at night, and I remember where I slept and all, but I'd hear those night sounds. I don't know what all it was. The crickets, I don't know what it was, but it's those night sounds and the ghosts and the bells. I'd hear them. That reminds me when we when we ate. Anyway, they always rang a bell for when dinner was ready. When Irene got the dinner ready, they'd always ring a bell. Everybody'd know to come and eat. But anyway, I forgot.
At night, you said you were listening
yes,
to the
just
bells.
okay,
The
those,
bells on the goats.
those
Is
night
that
sounds.
what bells?
Yeah, you could hear those and just hear the whatever the crickets, all of that at night, whatever sounds, but it would make me homesick. I just wanna, I'd get homesick. I didn't let anybody know it, but there'd be times I'd cry. I just want to go home. But I mean, I was fine the next morning. It was just, I just get lonesome at night sometime. But I love to go now. I just love to go.